Hello and welcome everyone to the second edition of the NST Insight Forum. Now, the NST Insight Forum is actually one of the initiatives by the New Straits Times to actually, as an extension of its newsroom journalism, and encourage a discussion on current policy issues and also topical matters. And in the spirit of the hashtag New Malaysia, that actually encourages discussion and different views and perspectives on various current issues, we are actually opening up today's Insight Forum to discuss one of the topics that we would like to find out more about, and we want to know the different opinions and perspectives from our panelists as well. So today our theme of discussion is aviation, and the topic that we're talking about is Malaysia as a preferred aviation hub. Are we there yet? And today we have in the studio three industry players who will be discussing this topic, and let me introduce them to you. On my right is Raja Azmi Raja Nazuddin, the Group Chief Executive Officer of Malaysia Airports Holdings Berhad, and an accountant by training. Raja Azmi was appointed as Group CEO on 4th January this year, and before that he was the Chief Financial Officer for 3 years. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And next to Raja Azmi, we have Dato' Azman Mahmud, the Chief Executive of the Malaysian Industrial Development Authority, MIDA. An engineer by training, Dato' Azman is in the forefront, always pushing the Malaysian aerospace industry blueprint agenda. Welcome, Dato', to the show.
Thank you for inviting.
And also on my far right is Mr. Andrew Herdman, the Director General of the Association of Asia Pacific Airlines, AAPA, and AAPA is actually the leading trade organization for international airlines based in the Asia Pacific region, which addresses a wide range of both regional and global policy issues affecting the industry. Now, welcome, gentlemen, to the second edition of the NST Insight Forum. And as I mentioned earlier, NST is actually pushing this forum forward as a way as one of the nation's oldest newspapers to actually encourage more discussion on topics. So today we're talking about Malaysia as an aviation hub. So my first question is for you, Raja Azmi. As the country's airport operator, where do you think we are at right now when we discuss the topic as a preferred aviation hub? Where is Malaysia at?
Okay. Thank you very much, Azaria, and thank you for inviting me to be here. Firstly, I believe that Malaysia has got a great potential to be a big super hub. But before that, maybe I just share a bit about statistics. We did about KUL, as in Kuala Lumpur, KLIA and KLIA2, we did about 60 million passengers last year. And in terms of international passengers, we are actually number 12 largest in the world. Why I say that we have a great potential to be even a greater hub is because there are certain characteristics of a good hub which we can tap into further. One of such characteristics is what you call extensive route offerings by airlines, which we can expand further. And then you have strong airlines connectivity. And then you have what you call minimum connecting time, or what you call MCT, and optimal service level, and ample terminal and runway capacity. So these are the 4 or 5 characteristics of a good hub. Whilst we are not 100% there yet, I feel that each of these elements can be tapped further. For example, if I were to expand a bit about connectivity, currently Malaysia has got about 47% full service carrier and 53% low-cost carrier. And you look at hubs like Frankfurt, Heathrow, Amsterdam, Dubai, Hong Kong, they are closer to 80% full service carrier, and even Changi is about 70%. So where I'm coming from, if let's say we actually grow, we grow the low-cost carrier, but also we also don't forget the full service carrier, because they are the one also bringing in more and more connectivity from the medium to long haul passengers. So in that aspect, there's some untapped potential in Malaysia for us to actually expand further in the full service carrier segment in order to actually meet more of the criteria of a good hub I mentioned earlier. But further to that, KLIA is also unique in that we fall under a 10 by 10 kilometer area, which is about 100 square kilometers, and we have our Aeropolis. In our Aeropolis, we have the likes of Mitsui, and coming soon next year, we have the Alibaba having their regional e-logistics center, and Airbus will be having their first wholly owned MRO complex within this perimeter. And with all this interplay of all these features, we have the potential to become even a greater hub and expand further from the already huge 60 million passengers that we recorded last year.
Okay. Now, we understand that KLIA is actually strategically positioned for domestic feeding and international distribution of traffic. But also on that note, yet it doesn't have extensive route offerings. So, compared to other airports, Changi in Singapore. So, what do you think can actually be done to overcome this?
Okay, so back to one of the characteristics I mentioned earlier, which is called MCT, minimum connecting time. At the moment, our transfer passengers about 20%, compared to, I would say, 30% and above would be a good number. And where I see that happening is because the full service carrier portion has somewhat reduced. Yeah. So what we can do, we can actually improve the minimum connecting time. At the moment, it's about 3 hours because you have to get out of the terminal to enter from one terminal to another between KLIA and KLIA 2. Yes. But when I say improving a minimum connecting time, we can actually go into what you call interlining or inter-terminal transfer at the airside. So by doing that, actually you can connect from one terminal to another in a very short period of time. For example, I came back, I just came back about a week ago from Montreal to KL. I took 2 airlines. I took British Airways from Montreal to London, and I took Malaysia Airlines from London to KL. Yeah. So, but my baggage check-in was Montreal KL. So it was a delightful experience because not only did I change airlines, but I also changed terminal. When I arrived in London, I arrived at Terminal 5. I took a bus to Terminal 4, which took about 10 minutes or so. But what was delightful was the smooth journey of the busing, which brought me from one terminal to another. Yeah. But I also enjoyed the fact that I need not worry about my luggage because my luggage was Montreal cool. But just by looking at the baggage tag, Montreal cool is so delightful. And that's the experience that we hope we will eventually introduce in Kuala Lumpur. Nice. In order to further improve ourselves or capture more volume that falls into the characteristics of a good hub I mentioned earlier. Okay.
Do you have like a time frame? How many years are we looking at until Malaysians can actually experience this?
Okay. So what we are doing now, we are piloting a project with Post Aviation, because Post Aviation does handle some carriers in KLIA as well as KLIA 2, and we want to do for a start baggage transfers at the airside baggage transfer. But currently, the passenger still has to get out of the terminal and from one terminal to another. Yeah. So that's a start. But eventually we want to move into a full interlining, whereby the baggage and the passengers can be transferred via the airside, just like the example I quoted earlier from Montreal to KL. In fact, there was another delightful experience I had. Boston KL. I had Boston New York via an American airline, and I had New York KL via Etihad Transit Abu Dhabi. My baggage was Boston KL. Again, you change airline, you change airports, but you get that full interlining effect. Yes. So that's the eventual goal that we hope to achieve in the years to come. Hopefully sooner than later in Kuala Lumpur.
I see. Okay. Now, before we get to you, Dato', we'd like to ask the following question to Mr. Herdman. Now, on the note of other airports being more seamless, having more connectivity and shorter transfer time compared to Malaysia. Now, as a representative in the Asia-Pacific region, of course, we will look to other airports closer to us, like Singapore and Bangkok, which has already developed so much further than us in these terms. So what do you think KL or Malaysia can actually emulate from these airports from Changi, Suvarnabhumi to actually lift us to that preferred aviation hub status?
I think we have to understand when we use the word hub what we're talking about. So it doesn't just mean a busy airport. So you have people traveling, residents, citizens going out for business and leisure, traveling outbound. You have a very successful inbound tourism for leisure and business also coming in. So these are the primary flows in and out. Then on top of that you have transit traffic, which is connecting through an airport. And the status of a hub is an airport which has a sizable component of connecting traffic. Now, in terms of how passengers start by wanting to get from one place to another, whether they can fly non-stop direct or whether they want to go through indirectly is their choice. Generally speaking, they'll prefer a non-stop service, but they'll consider a one-stop service, maybe because it's inevitable, there isn't a direct service, or they have a choice. And so it's a function of what the passengers want to do. But we have to remember the passengers start off knowing where they start and where they want to get to, and then they have a choice of how to get there, and they have a choice of airlines. So the second point I want to emphasize is that a successful hub relies on an airport that's run efficiently and offers good service. But it's the key component from a passenger point of view is the network connectivity, and that's delivered by the airlines. So it's a symbiotic relationship between the airports and the airlines that delivers the connectivity. It's a combination of the airlines' networks and the services provided by the airport. So you can't separate the question of, how competitive are you as a hub without looking at what the base carriers are contributing. Kuala Lumpur is unusual because you have two major base carriers, Malaysian Airlines and AirAsia, which have different business models, one full service, one low cost.
Yes.
Traditionally, it's the full service carriers that have focused on the network model because they were medium to long haul was part of the network, and connectivity is much more important in the long haul routes because there are fewer direct non-stop services. Sometimes it's simply not possible. In the low cost carriers, generally speaking, they focused on point to point, not connecting. AirAsia is somewhat unusual because it's grown and it's a collection of operating companies, and it operates a very dense network across the region. And it includes AirAsia X, which is a long-haul operation. And long-haul operations rely on network feed. So AirAsia as a group is a more network-focused low-cost carrier than many other low-cost carriers, which are pure point-to-point. So in KLIA, you have a combination of a low-cost airline group, which is offering a significant amount of connectivity and connections and network, and you have a full-service carrier, Malaysian Airlines. So both are contributing to the success of the hub. You mentioned a very good point that you have two terminals, KLA and KLA2, and the connection between those from a passenger point of view is not integrated. You have to come out. Sometimes that results in visa complications. It takes longer, and you don't have a baggage handling system integrated. So that's one of the key steps forward, is in a multi-terminal airport, to be successful, you not only have to transfer within a terminal, but you need to be able to get inter-terminal transfers of people and baggage, and cargo as well. So these are important from the point of view of strengthening the effectiveness of the operational effectiveness of the hub. But the key point I want to emphasize is strategically you can't plan an airport strategy separate from what airlines are doing. It's a partnership. So airlines and airports have to work together in terms of route development and so on. And I've mentioned the base carriers, but other carriers also feed traffic to and from. But it's true generally that the base carriers represent usually about 70 or 75% of the connecting traffic because they're connecting to their own services. But the fact you have many other airlines serving KLA, they're also bringing passengers and feeding passengers onto other services. So there's an element of that as well.
Yes. Okay. So you mentioned it's not just the airport, it's also the airlines and what they can offer the passengers. But how can we actually appeal to more top-tier airlines to come to KLIA and use it as a hub? How do you think we can actually, some incentives perhaps for them? What do you think?
Well, all airports try and attract additional players. Air traffic rights are administered in a historical reasons are administered by government-to-government negotiations. But generally speaking, we've moved to a liberalized environment where there are no restrictions on capacity or services that can be offered or the prices that can be charged. But an airline needs to get traffic rights before it can operate the services. Then it's got to see sufficient demand. And the fact that we look at origin, destination, inbound traffic, outbound traffic, and the fact that you also look at the question of how much connectivity will there be, because that will supplement. And it's true that in the airline business, many individual services depend on a mixture of traffic. So when you're working out the route economics, you do factor in not just the people origin, destination, point to point, but how much feed, and that can come from partners. So airlines work with each other through interlining or code share agreements or alliance collaboration and so on. That also reflects the way in which the airline industry, unlike many other sectors, there's a lot of cooperation as well as competition amongst airlines.
Okay.
So from an airport point of view, you have to orchestrate attracting more airlines, getting airlines to work, well, try and offer the airlines a smooth service, but also recognizing airlines want to cooperate. This is how you build up a reputation. And there are many other successful hubs around the world, including in Asia. The key point to emphasize is that in hub traffic, the passenger always has a choice. He could use another hub.
Yes.
So there's a competitive element. There's nothing that forces him to come through your hub. So he looks at your services, your network, your frequency. He looks at your brand reputation, your service reputation. And once you've established a good reputation, you're on people's list of good hubs through which to connect.
Yeah.
But still you shop around. And in the end, it comes down to price, schedule, frequency, and perceptions of quality.
So the consumer still has a choice. Yeah.
Ultimately, we're all serving the consumer. We should
Yeah.
never forget that.
Yes.
It's the travelling public that pays for all of this,
Yes.
and we're simply trying to work together to meet their needs.
Yes, to accommodate them. Okay, for sure. Now, Dato' Azman, I also want to ask you the same question. I think that question is more suited for you, of course, the incentives that we can actually give to industry players to choose Malaysia as a preferred aviation hub. But before that, first up, I want to know your view from the viewpoint of the government. Where are we in terms of becoming an aviation hub currently, do you think?
Well, it is like, shall I call it a moving target? It is always an aspiration, an ongoing effort by everyone, including in the government. The reason being is we are located in Southeast Asia. Of course, every ASEAN countries will say that, but we are right in the middle. And we have the land bank to create that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And we have other things, that we have developed, the infrastructure, connectivity within the country, as well as, the international connectivity. Of course, having said that, for the last 50 years of industrial development and promoting business to come to Malaysia, still we need to continue to develop this initiative. And in fact, from the government side, there is already a strategic plan, logistic, and then we have tourism, as well as the aerospace blueprint. And all these to create the activity, which I'm moving towards a term called the baseload. We cannot expect connectivity to just exist by itself and too dependent on international travelers to use, for example, KLIA as the hub.
Yeah.
But you need to have the baseload to create that demand, whether it is business travelers, tourists, as well as cargo. I think for air travel, cargo is there's a lot of space for further development for Malaysia, and that is there's a target that is set under the logistic master plan, and the role of MIDA, we always promote businesses, manufacturers, logistic providers, distributors, even regional headquarters. If you notice in our engagement with the business community, we always position Malaysia as the regional hub.
Yeah.
The gateway to ASEAN and ASEAN Plus, in the region. So we have to create a base load and bring regional companies, regional manufacturers. Then you create more executive people, cargo that need the services of these what they call airlines and cargo companies and logistic companies. So I think this will be continued. Of course, we have some competition, but Malaysia has its strength. We have the land bank, we have the space, we have other components for making a decision, investment decision as a favorable place to do business, which is, is gaining momentum and moving forward. The new Malaysia economic plan, the 12th Malaysia plan, will be strengthening this ecosystem. So the potential is there, but we need to work together with industry. I like to, from the government side, maybe the whole of a government approach, because all this master plan and strategic plan and execution requires a concerted effort from all the agencies, to support the business community and making business environment more conducive. Then the companies, investors will come and create that base load that I mentioned, that will stimulate that connectivity that required by the business people.
Okay, so tourism actually plays a part as well for travelers to actually choose Malaysia as a stop for them. Do you think that more should be done to actually promote Malaysia as a tourism spot, or are you planning something currently?
I think the tourism industry is not necessarily depending on building hotels or even shopping malls and all that. There are so many other things. Malaysia tourism industry can look at how beautiful the country is. That development, I believe there are a lot more opportunity that we can have. We need to have more international events. For example, we need to bring famous or English football league team, or even Spanish or even Italian. Because you just imagine one game, they have regional followers, and if you have multiple games in the country, so you already create that capacity. One, for example, and then last time maybe we need to have more entertainment, jazz concerts, signature events to create that vibrant tourism industry, other than the nature and beauty things to do outdoor that Malaysia has to offer. So that there's a lot of room, and from the government side, we are promoting this, giving incentive. We mentioned about incentive just now. So if we incentivize those who produce or invest in this tourism-related activities, then it will spill over to creating more traffic. Then the airline will come and provide the service.
I see. What about the incentives to the aviation industry players?
I believe, we cannot just talk about to incentivize in every sector. I think we're looking at incentivizing certain sectors that will create the spillover, and that has been our approach. But the airport operators or owners, they themselves, like KLIA, they also do some give some incentive, I believe. So too much incentive is not so good for the industry as well. And our approach, as I said, will be to incentivize the catalytic sectors. Then the spillover will take care by itself.
I see. Okay. Some very interesting points there, gentlemen. But now it's time for a short break. I'm sure you guys need a short breather. And well, so far we've already discussed about where we are, what we should do, and also the government support in achieving Malaysia's status as an aviation hub. When we come back, we'll talk more about this topic with our guests in the studio. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this.
trying times. Unforgettable moments. Challenging moments. Since 1845, we have been there for Malaysia. We have been there for you. The New Straits Times, always with you.
When you talk about hubs, this is another dimension, not just the passenger flows.
Hi guys, we are back and thank you for joining us on the NST Online FB Live. This is the NST, the second edition of the NST Insight Forum, and today we are talking about aviation, and our topic is Malaysia as a preferred aviation hub. Are we there yet? That's the question at hand, and we are joined again by our guests in the studio. We have Raja Azmi, Dato Azman, and also Mr. Andrew Herdman. And now we are going back to our discussion and talking about connectivity. Now, gentlemen, it's understood that for the country to be a preferred aviation hub, the most important thing is for us to have connectivity. So the ICAO actually defines this as an indicator of a network's concentration and its ability to move passengers from their origin to their destination seamlessly. So my first question is for you, Mr. Herdman. Now, for a country like Malaysia, how do you think that air connectivity has actually changed in the past? Let's say the past 10 years, Malaysia as compared to the regional players. What do you think?
Well, air travel is incredibly popular, and we now treat it as part of everyday modern life. And so what's happened over time is the industry is doubling in size every 15 years and more quickly than that in Asia.
Yes.
So we've seen tremendous growth, and with that growth come not just additional frequency, but additional points in the network, additional services. So you're constantly adding services, but at the same time you're thickening up existing services and adding frequency. So network dynamics depend on those things, changing patterns of demand. The other thing is the capability of modern aircraft. The question of whether you can operate non-stop is a function of the technical capabilities of the aircraft. And as new aircraft generations come along with better fuel efficiency, they can operate longer services non-stop. So what happens is you tend to have particular long-haul destinations which can't be done non-stop. You have to go through a stopping point, and during that phase, everyone competes to be the stopping point. So the classic still is Australia to Europe, the kangaroo route, where there are many hubs in between who are competing to be the stop you make. Ultimately, of course, the hope is, and Qantas are trying to push this, ultimately to be able to do non-stop services. They're already operating from Western Australia, Perth, into Europe non-stop. They have ambitions one day to be able to do Sydney into Europe. So the technical capabilities, if you can do it non-stop, people will pay a premium for the convenience. But they'll also take a lower fare and take a stop. So you see this dynamic between non-stop services competing against one-stop services. And of course, once there's a one-stop service, there are many other ways of doing it. And we all compete in that space. The other thing that's changed is the patterns of flow. Asia used to be a destination for people from other parts of the world. But now in the last 20 years, we've seen tremendous growth in Asian travel within the region, Asian outbound travel. Markets like China have been transformed. India is beginning to grow domestically and internationally, has a lot of potential. So when you talk about the expansion of the network around KLIA, you look at Southeast Asia, you mentioned ASEAN. This is a very dense set of flows. The flows between Southeast Asia and North Asia, Japan, Korea, China. These are increasingly popular leisure destinations. Australia, New Zealand, very popular leisure destinations for all, from Asia. And then into Europe, the question of do you focus on the major hubs in Europe or do you offer new services? So these are decisions that airlines are making all the time, and it gives customers more choice. The connectivity is the convenience of what is the connect time, how seamless is it, how attractive are the fares. So from a passenger point of view, they've never had more choice. They have an increasing number of non-stops on offer, but we still know that people will shop around and take a slightly less convenient routing for a more attractive price. So this is how airlines compete and how airports evolve the traffic. The last thing to say is that there's a lot of growth to come, but it's not always predictable where it's going to be. So you have to be rather flexible about how you adapt. And that's what airlines do, and airports in their own way have to adjust to changing travel patterns.
Yeah. Okay, speaking about adapting, how do you think Malaysia is actually adapting to the advancements in connectivity?
Well, you've seen the successful growth of AirAsia as a group, centered on Malaysia, but with other bases, and they built a very dense network across the region, and been a pioneer in terms of low-cost expansion. Malaysian Airlines is still a highly respected brand with a strong regional and international network, and they're also competing. And they collaborate with other airlines through bilateral cooperation with other airlines and so on. So I think overall, the growth of those two base carriers provides the basis, the base load, as you say. That's supplemented by the fact you've got new airlines coming in to Malaysia from other regions that are just emerging, other parts of the Middle East, from other parts of Eastern Europe and so on. You know, these are also developing markets. So we have to see that it's a global network and you you fit into it. Not just within the region. We must focus internationally, the global connectivity.
I see. Okay. Now next we have a question for Raja Azmi, also talking about connectivity. Now it's actually essential to optimize on the strength of our full service carriers and also our low cost carriers. So at KLIA, for example, right now the mix is 47% for full cost and 53% for low cost. So how is MAHB actually leveraging on this to try and push the country as a preferred aviation hub?
So as mentioned by Andrew earlier, the passengers have got a lot of choices, and the studies have shown that in the next 20 years or so, there will be another 2 billion additional passengers coming into this region. So when they have a lot of choices, we want them to make KL their preferred choice. So in this regard, we also gave incentive. We talked about incentives earlier. For the last 17 years or so, since 2002, we've actually given out about 800 million ringgit in incentives to attract airlines. But as far as the interlining that I mentioned earlier, we want to give them a choice where we will not be actually forcing any airline to interline. However, we want to provide that service. For starters, I mentioned earlier, we want to do a self-connect program where Post Aviation does some airlines in both KLIA, about 20 airlines or so, and 3 airlines in KLIA 2, which is Jetstar, Cebu, and Scoot. So the first step on this self-connect activity is to do just the baggage transfer first at the site. But the passenger still needs to get out of the terminal. But that doesn't quite fulfill the criteria I mentioned earlier about the MCT, the minimum connecting time of still takes some time because you still got to get out of the terminal. But at least it's a start for you to experience that baggage. But moving forward, when the baggage system of the airline starts to talk to each other, like I quoted the example, Montreal, KL, and Boston, KL, that's where we eventually want to get into. Once we get that seamless transfer or seamless connectivity, then the passengers will actually have more choices. Probably now they will decide to maybe transfer or transit at Bangkok or Singapore or maybe Hong Kong. We want them to make that choice in Kuala Lumpur over time by providing that facility for them.
Okay, what about terminal connectivity between KLIA Main and KLIA 2? What are your plans for that?
Okay, so see, like what we did for what I experienced in Heathrow, Terminal 5, Terminal 4, it was not a physical connectivity where you actually built a structure that connects the two terminals. I took a bus. The bus ride was about 10 minutes or so. So actually we can still do busing, but the busing is for the passengers. What's also critical, like Andrew mentioned, is the baggage system. So that it is a seamless baggage system that actually transfers from one terminal to another, and the passengers don't have to worry about whether their baggage will be lost or so. Even if you change planes, you will still get into the right plane. So eventually we want to do that program, and it need not be that costly if you don't actually construct a physical infrastructure to connect the terminal. You can do busing and just make sure that you actually interline the baggage system. So I find that over time it's something doable, and once you actually have that service available, that KLIA and KLIA2 has got a seamless connectivity via the S-side interlining, then it gives the passenger that choice that he can make to choose Cool over other hubs.
Do you think that actually achieving this, the connectivity between KLIA main and KLIA2, it's going to be quite expensive, quite costly?
Okay,
so
we will gather not, because as I experienced in other airports, they do busing, and the baggage can be transferred via bonded trucks or dollies and so on and so forth. So we don't foresee that to be too costly in that aspect. But what we see the advantage of that happening is that then there are multiple choices already. Because in Singapore, T1, T2, T3 is somewhat interlined. In Bangkok, the terminals are interlined, whereas for us, we are not. So by actually interlining the terminal, then we become as competitive, because our prices are pretty competitive in the region. So we have the opportunity to capture a pie, a slice of the pie which otherwise actually had gone to other hubs, so to speak.
Okay. So moving on to you, Dato' Azman, what do you think about air connectivity in the region, particularly in Malaysia, and what can we do more to actually unlock the potential?
As I mentioned, connectivity is the essential part of Malaysia as a country, being in the global supply chain. So we have foreign investment, we have domestic investment. Essentially, we are a trading nation. Of course, when you talk about trade, the goods are handled through seaports and also some through airports. So connectivity, I'll give you an example. I have a few investors who are looking at, they want to uplift their goods and connect to Incheon, for example. And they want it, less than 24 hours. Reaching the customer. So that connectivity must be available. Maybe a freighter, a 747 freighter, that carries this kind of specialized high-end goods to their customers in China or in Shanghai or Korea or Japan. So again, back to the base load. We need to focus on the base load to stimulate that connectivity. When there is a demand, then the airline or the cargo service or even passengers that they do business with the region, they want to go and fly and have a few meetings and visit their factories and come back to at night and have dinner with the family. Those regional headquarters that I'm referring to. So the other point is being what you call a country that is part of the supply chain of many major investors. Connectivity is the what you call most criteria that they look for. Of course, it's a chicken and egg situation. To me, you need cargo space, you need connectivity and efficiency. For cargo space, you cannot have an airline just carrying passengers. You need to have maybe a wide body that carries passengers plus certain amount of cargo to meet, that kind of demand of business, as well as the business travelers, cargo, and also tourism. So 3 in 1. I think that is the way forward that Malaysia should address in designing or buying new aircraft. Or inviting, those airlines to come and operate through Malaysia and provide the regional connectivity.
Okay. But at the moment, Malaysia is also it's already a preferred hub for many multinational corporations. And what do you think is the attraction for Malaysia currently, and what more can be done to attract more companies?
Well, there are many factors. First of all, we have developed the industrial infrastructure for many years. If you talk about industrial master plan, we have going to finish the third one, and we're now doing the fourth one. And MIDA alone has been around for the last 50 years. So it is an ongoing effort to create the vibrancy, and more now that we are talking about more of quality investment, digital economy, e-commerce, what we call engineering and advanced technology in electrical electronics, machinery and equipment, specialized high-end equipment, is very precious. So it has to be shipped by air to a certain extent, for really high tech, because you can't afford to be in the sea freight for few weeks and risk involved there, and these are the mix and challenges, issues and challenges that always in our mind in attracting investment in Malaysia. But of course, the other strength, we have the talent, the ease of doing business that has been tested by many multinationals. We have now maybe around 5,000 investment projects in manufacturing alone that are already here, that are foreign investors. And on top of that, our companies are also becoming regional. If you observe in the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange, these companies are part of the supply chain and spillover of those foreign investment that we have brought for so many years. For example, some of the machinery companies are already listed, and they are making machines and they're exporting to, the region. And logistic companies, from just what we call local players, some of them have become a regional player. And this demand for travel and cargo is going to increase in the future. Passenger alone, now you have reached 60 million, and in the future we are talking about 100 over million in the next maybe 10, 20 years. So this connectivity, wide body, as far as airline and cargo is concerned, and efficiency is going to be the game changer to make Malaysia as the preferred hub.
I see. Okay. What do you think?
I just want to emphasize the importance of cargo, as you've been saying. Air cargo is about 1% of the tonnage of international trade, but it's about a third of the value, because this is high value items, time sensitive items. So for any manufacturing business, they're interested in air connectivity. And it's provided in the bellies of passenger aircraft, particularly wide-bodied aircraft which have large belly capacity, and then some dedicated freighters. And the air cargo is critical for the success of being part of global supply chains, because nowadays things are not just made in one place and then delivered to the end consumer. We're talking about subcomponents being transported back and forth within the region. So good air cargo connectivity is critical for the success of global supply chains. And Malaysia is well plugged into that as part of these Asian supply chains, and then often with multinational investment and so on. So the cargo connectivity is important. I mentioned in the passenger business, people will pay a premium for non-stop service, but cargo is not so fussy. So proportionately, cargo goes indirectly through hubs. And so the competition in the cargo world amongst the hubs is quite intense. That's good for the consumers. They have lots of choice. And to be successful, you have to be very nimble. You have to win the customers, and you have to deliver service and make sure that the goods get to where they need to be on time. So that's an important part of when you talk about the hub concept. the importance of air cargo in supporting global supply chains.
If I can add,
Yeah.
I mentioned about the Alibaba initiatives. When it's completed in the third quarter next year, and it will be the regional e-commerce logistics center, the first one outside China. And the projection for the cargo business, now we are doing about 700,000 tons per year. The projection is to double it to about 1.3 million tons by 2028.
Okay.
That, together with what I mentioned earlier about Airbus and its MRO center, is intended to be catalytic, so much so that the passengers and the cargos and the MRO complement each other. So much so that there's a dynamic or interplay between components that will actually further our potential to be a great hub.
I see. So on that note, I'd like you to conclude for us on our discussion today. So we spoke about, are we there yet? Not quite, but we're moving forward. So how do you think we can actually move forward, and how is MEHB planning to move forward in this aspect?
So as I mentioned earlier, we are already doing 60 million, which is 12th largest international PAX, and we are not even having that inter-terminal connectivity. So by actually improving that interlining, we see even a greater potential. And we are also blessed with a huge land bank to which we want to do activities pertaining to aero, MRO, logistics and so on and so forth. So with that happening, as well as capitalizing on our Aeropolis land bank activities, we believe that there will be another phase of growth coming in for the country via Kul or Kuala Lumpur.
Okay. What about you, Dato' Azman? What does MIDA have planned for the near future, the short-term plans?
Well,
is there anything that you can divulge?
we will continue to implement what the strategic plan that has been laid out, and we will be more targeted. In fact, our collaboration with Malaysia Airport, to bring more of their customers to KLIA, for example. Or not only that, we have started, if you watch in the news, the announcement, we are working with international freight companies like DHL, to identify and give the value proposition to their customers, how strategic Malaysia as the business and cargo hub. We really are interested in to increase the cargo capability in Malaysia, because we have a very good industrial base. The base load is there. We are very good over the years. The international companies that are based in Kuala Lumpur, majority of them, and are managing their operation in the region. Some of them up to Australia and even China. So this will be more intensified. So we continue to look for new models of collaboration, even with with companies, banks, even with my counterpart in some of the countries that are promoting investment and trade. So it's getting more dynamic, more complex, but we have to push forward.
I see. Okay, moving on to you, Mr. Herdman, before we go for your conclusion, just to mention more on the cargo aspect. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that the cargo movement in Malaysia has actually been on a decline in the past year. Is that correct?
Well, globally, air cargo is going, as a result of the trade disputes and the slowdown in the global economy, air cargo volumes are actually lower than they were a year ago.
Okay, so why
That's
is
not
that?
that's not the norm. I mean, the cargo business has been growing steadily for many years, but it reflects the fact that the trade wars are real.
Yeah.
It's an element of uncertainty for businesses. It's undermining confidence in terms of investment. So it's having a disruptive effect. So it is challenging times for air cargo. But having said that, I emphasize that air cargo is keeping the wheels of commerce moving just in time. It's still providing a valuable service. But it's true that the actual volumes are lower than they were a year ago, and that's a global phenomenon, and obviously a concern. And we believe that borders should be open, and free trade has been the key to the prosperity of this region and many others. We view that with some concern, that the lack of progress in resolving the trade disputes. There's been very high profile the US-China dispute, but that affects many countries in Asia because of these integrated supply chains I talked about.
Yes.
So it's that is a major concern. But longer term, we see continued growth, not just in passenger numbers, but also in cargo, and so the need for continued investment. The critical success factors, you've got to realize you're competing against many other well-established hubs and airports.
Yeah.
So capacity is one thing with the growth. Congestion is never good, so building capacity. The other thing is operational reliability. These are very complex businesses, very interdependent. So the quality of the resilience of the operation, these are critical success factors in our business for any airport, for any airline. And we need to work together to make sure that we deliver that service, because that's what we're measured by. And there are weather disruption, typhoons or flooding or whatever it may be.
Yes.
There are many challenges. The industry has to work together to overcome that and deliver value to the customers. The passengers rely on it. Our cargo shippers rely on it. That's where we have to work together. Lastly, I'd say there is a role for government. People can only cross borders based on whether they need visas. We're concerned about, we talked about incentives. I'm concerned about disincentives. You have to pay to cross borders, visa fees or departure fees or charges and so on. We need to be conscious of the fact that yes, travel demand is growing, but we also need to be mindful of the fact that we shouldn't burden the industry with excessive cost, because that's a disincentive to choose one destination over another.
Yes.
So looking at that, to the extent those are government policies, those are things the government have to think about. So the balancing incentives, disincentives, costs, as you're promoting the development of the industry, I think you need to be mindful of that. So that's why airlines are concerned about airport costs, airports are concerned about charges, levies, and so on. So these are always the subject of discussion. Ultimately, it's the consumer who's looking for a good deal and has the choice. So we need to be mindful of that.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, well, thank you guys for sharing with us today. It's certainly been a fruitful discussion on the way forward for Malaysia as an aviation hub, but unfortunately, we've come to the end of the discussion today. Now, before we wrap up, just to share with you, the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, actually tells us that a strong hub is built on the following aspects. First, strong airline connectivity and extensive route offerings, ample terminal and runway capacity, optimum standard service levels, and low minimum connecting time in between flights, which are all factors that we discussed earlier with our panelists in the studio. And we know that MEHB has been undertaking this critical role for many years now, and as an airport operator, it drives air connectivity and aviation-related developments, and we do see the potential for KLIA to become a preferred aviation hub in the very near future and the years to come. And with that, we'd like to thank our guests in the studio once again. Thank you so much, Raja Azmi. Thank you, Dato' Azman, and thank you, Mr. Herdman, for joining us today. We certainly appreciate you guys making the time for our NST Insight Forum.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to you as well for joining us on the NST FB Live. Of course, we'll have many more topics to discuss in the future, so don't forget to follow our NST Online FB for more updates and other topics that we'll be talking about next. Until we meet again, I'm Azaria Tagaya. Thank you for joining us and have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.